And welcome, Miss Amanda, and welcome everybody to the Successful Teacher Cohort.
Well, thank you, Donna, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm really excited to be on this journey with you for the next 6 months. This is our second round of the Successful Teacher Cohort, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Whether you're a new to the field teacher or someone who's been working for several years, I think as we dive into all of our topics, it's either going to build your teaching skills and lay down that foundation, or it's going to be a refresher for you. For those who have been in the fields for a while, there's things that you're going to have these aha moments like, oh, yes, I need to work on that, or yep, that's a skill I need to brush up on. So jumping in, I want to just give you a little bit about my background. I've been in the field for over 20 years. I started way back when I was a teenager babysitting for neighborhood families, and that's kind of where I fell in love with working with young children. From there, I moved on to a camp counselor job. And then when it was time for me to go to college, I decided to study early childhood education. And then that led me to my first teaching job as I worked in Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, once you take child growth and development, they consider you a lead teacher. So I got a full-time job working as a lead teacher in a classroom, and then moved my way up to center director. And I was a director for 10 years at the YMCA. I did that both in Lawrence, Massachusetts and Lowell, Massachusetts. And in both of those centers, I had a staff team of about 7 working under me. And then, of course, COVID hit, and I kind of reevaluated where I was at in my career. And as much as I loved being in the center, there were some parts of the director job that were really starting to wear on me. I was really feeling that burnout. So I started looking at what else could I do with my background. And I stumbled upon an apprenticeship job working for Community Action Partnership, which back then was Southern New Hampshire Services. And with the apprenticeship program, I now run the early childhood apprenticeship program for Capper. And what we do is I help new to the field teachers, assistant teachers become lead teachers. So we combine education with mentorship and help them grow. And where the successful teacher cohort came from was one day Donna was down in the Nashua office visiting and working on some things. And her and I just started talking about, how could we bring what I do in apprenticeship to a workshop so that all of you could take advantage of learning, first year teaching skills or brushing up on some of those basic teacher skills. So that's me. And I apologize. I am a new puppy owner, and I hope you can't hear him. But in the background, if you hear barking and crying, I have a 5-month-old puppy that's in the kitchen, and he's really angry at me right now. I tried to give him some enrichment toys, just like we do with the children. I froze his dinner, thinking it would take him a long time to eat it, and I think he's mad that his dinner is frozen. So I apologize for any background noise. So the next part with our cohort is I kind of just want to talk about how it's set up. So for the next 6 months, we're going to have what we call your initial monthly session, and that's going to be the 2-hour session with me at the beginning of each month. And then 2 weeks later, you're going to have what we call an expert session. And that's going to be with different people throughout our field in New Hampshire who is going to come in and they're going to take the topic that we talk about and really highlight and take a deeper dive into what we talk about. When you do the 2-hour session with me, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. and kind of give you the broad scope of each topic. And then with that expert, they're going to really dive in deeper. In between the two sessions, you're also going to have an optional additional support. So if we get into a topic and you're like, oh, wow, I'm really struggling with this in my classroom, or I really wish Amanda or Donna, or maybe even the expert could come out to my classroom and take a look at, what's going on, we're able to do that. So we can either set up a Zoom session with you, or if, let's say, you want someone to come look at your learning environment, we can come out to your center and do that one-on-one TA with you. We just ask that you try to do it in the monthly time frame. So if you want to set that up, you can reach out to me or Donna, and we'll set up that additional TA session with you. So what we're going to do now is with our cohort, part of it is all of you. So not only are you here taking in all of the information that we have to bring to you, but I want you to start to know each other and bond with each other, because we're going to be in the same group for the next 6 months. So sometimes when you take a training, there's lots of different people in the training, and then you move on to a new training and it's a new group of people. But we're going to stay the same group of people from month to month, session to session. And I want everybody to feel comfortable with one another and feel open to share things that go on in your classroom. I want this to be a safe place for all of you to kind of bring your struggles, because I want you to be able to work them out here in this cohort. That's really what this cohort is about, is not only to learn new things, but to kind of feel out, hey, like what's going wrong, or I tried this and it didn't work. And when you share those things with the group, what ends up happening is other teachers here on the call are like, you know what, I struggled with that, in my classroom, and these are some suggestions that I have. Or here's a transition song that I love to use and it works really well. So what we're going to do now is I would like everybody to put in the chat their name, what center they work at, and what age group you teach. Right. So it looks like we have a really good mix of the different age groups. So we have toddler teachers, preschool teachers, and infant teachers, and some who work um, with all of the age groups. So that's great. Most of my experience is with preschool children. Um, I spent a little bit of time in an infant classroom back when I first started teaching. They were opening a third classroom and I jumped in there to help out. But most of my experience is with preschool. So those of you who teach the infants and toddlers, sometimes if you want to jump in and just add a little bit of what I have to say, that would be really helpful to me. And then with our cohorts, so we have our kind of cohort norms or Zoom norms for participation. So if you can have your camera on, I know everybody just got out of work and you're probably tired and had a busy day, but feel free to eat. And if you have to get up and move around or tend to something in your house, I'm completely fine with that. Please use the chat box or come off of mute to engage with us. When questions are asked, I'd really love people to participate. It really helps when we have great group discussions. Engage in the activities, share your experiences, and of course, always have fun. So before we jump into tonight's topic, I was just thinking about, it being September 1st and how September is really like a teacher's new year. So in January, when we celebrate New Year's and New Year's Eve, we always set intentions for ourselves. But I thought, how great would it be if you guys could set intentions for your teaching career? So, it's a new year. You might have a new group of children, maybe even a new co-teacher or a new classroom or even a refreshed classroom with new materials in it. So let's take a few minutes, and if you could choose 3 words for how you want this new year to feel, what would they be? And you can either put them in the chat or you can come off of mute and you can share them with us. These are great. I see a lot of fun, engaging, positive, enriching, creative, motivated. I love to see the words enjoyable and fun because that's one of the best part with working with our age group is every day is fun. It can be challenging, but it's also a lot of fun. Calm. I like that too, Robin, a calm here. And we can take this one step further. You don't have to do it now, but you can also use these as a journal prompt. So if you want to write these words down somewhere and then revisit them later on, and you can write down how are you going to have a positive, productive, fun year? What new things are you going to bring to your classroom? What new teaching skills might you get from this cohort, and how can you apply them to those 3 words? Thank you for sharing, Michaela. Nature-inspired activities. We actually are going to, when we get to learning environments, we're going to do a whole section on nature and the outdoor classroom. So moving into tonight's cohorts, tonight's all about safety. So our main learning objectives are: what is the teacher's role in keeping kids safe? And what does a safe classroom look like? So just, does anybody want to come off of mute and just share with us What do you think a safe classroom looks like? Or what does a safe classroom mean to you? Thank you, Tara. Engaged, supervised, and organized. Does anybody else want to share what they think a safe classroom looks like or feels like?
We have to account for our children, like every 5 minutes, count them.
Yes, knowing your ratio and who's entered the room and who's exited the room is really important. Thank you for that, Robin. So we have keeping the kids safe, supervising and playing with them, and kids can feel confident and comfortable playing and learning together in that classroom that is organized. Great, thank you. And yes, age-appropriate materials too. So the number one priority in keeping children safe starts with you, the teacher, the educator, because you are the trusted adults in the classroom. So your number one priority should be safety. And I want you to remember that because the learning and the fun activities can't happen if we don't have safety. And providing a safe environment and safe practices are going to prevent injuries and incidents from happening in the classroom. And just like Robin shared with us, counting the children and knowing, how many kids you have. In addition to that, supervision is a big key to keeping children safe. So when you're implementing activities, I want you to ask yourself, are they safe? Are the children learning? And are they having fun? So if you do it in that order, if there's a safe, controlled environment, then the children are going to be able to learn and have fun. And then getting back to it being a new year and having new children and new families in your classroom or in your center, I want you to think about that relationship between caregiver and the families. So that trust between the two. Think about a mom. Maybe she's new to the area, she's new to the town, and she's enrolling her children in your center for the very first time. And it's the first day of school. How do you think this mom feels?
Nervous.
Yes. Yep. Nervous. What else? Shy and unsure.
Intimidated.
Yep. Intimidated. Protective of her children. Stressed and nervous. Right, because it's a really big deal. You're taking someone's precious everything, right? And they're trusting that you are going to keep them safe during the day when they're with you. So that's why I say safety is going to be your number one priority. And when you're trying to build trust with the families, safety has to come first. Because if the parents don't trust that their child is going to be safe, then you're not going to have that strong bond with the families and that good relationship. You also want to have open and honest communication with the parents because, as we know, accidents are going to happen. There will be incidents. There are going to be safety drills. You're going to have those fire drills. There could be a time where an emergency does happen. And if you have great, honest, and open communication with the families when an incident happens, when there is an emergency, then that trust is going to be there with them, and they're going to know that you put safety first and that their children are safe with you, even though these things happen. So does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So a way to keep children safe is supervision, and it's what we call active supervision. And active supervision promotes a safe environment and it prevents injuries in young children. It requires focused attention and initial observation at all times. And there's 4 key components to active supervision. And the first one is position. So can you see and hear all of the children in your care? So when you're setting up your classroom, I want you to think about this. Do you have shelving positioned in certain ways, like we all do, because you want to have those centers? You want to have your math center and your art center. So you need that shelving to section off the classroom. But how it's positioned, can you see the kids? So if you're sitting down at the table working with a group of kids and there's children on the other side of the block shelf, can you see them? Can you hear them? Do you know what they're doing? Another thing is when you're out on the playground with positioning, you might have a climbing structure in the middle of your playground or a sandbox off in the corner and children riding bikes around. Can you see everybody from where you're standing, or is the climbing structure obstructing your view of the children in the sandbox? So just know how to position yourself within the classroom so that you can see and hear all of the children. Also scan and count. So know your ratio, know how many kids were dropped off in the morning, know how many kids got picked up. Did somebody leave early? You want to be constantly scanning and counting and know how many children are in your care. Number 3 is listen. So listen closely to the children to quickly identify signs of potential danger. So this goes into a little bit of knowing your children, knowing what their cries sounds like, especially for the babies. Someone might have pinched their finger, or maybe a bite happened in the classroom. So just knowing those sounds, is a child crying because they're missing mom, or are they crying because someone bit them? With the older children, listening to their play, can you anticipate that a power struggle is about to happen and somebody's going to hit oversharing? So always having not only your eyes open, but your ears open too, to what's going on in the classroom. And then beyond that is those emergency situations. So always, scanning the room, looking for those emergency situations, listening to what's going on in the environment. And then the last one is anticipating children's behaviors. So being aware of the children's moods and knowing when a potential, situation might happen. Thinking about the beginning of the new year, do you have some kids that are really struggling with being away from mom and dad and their families? Do you have kids that might be running out of the classroom? Do you have kids that wander off? Do you have kids that get upset, or kids that take dangerous risks? So just getting to know those personalities and trying to anticipate what's going to happen. Also thinking back to bullet 3, Sometimes when the room is silent, so when there's no noise, you might say, something's going on, something's not right. So the children might be into something that they're not supposed to be into. So thinking of that as well. So on the next slide, we're going to watch our first video of the night. And it's kind of all about the dangers or potential dangers that can pop up in a classroom. And I do have to say this video is from England. So some of the language that they use is a little bit different than some of the terms that we use. They're going to refer to the school as the nursery. And they also call the playground the garden. So, and can everyone hear the video? Okay, good.
Around the nursery, there are many possible hazards, and it is paramount to be aware of these for the safety of everybody. This short programme will identify certain hazards and challenge you to be constantly aware of everything around you.
Nursery where child died ignored safety risks. An investigation has been launched into how a baby boy sustained serious head injuries. A nursery was fined £60,000 yesterday over the death of a baby who was fed dairy products despite having a severe allergy to baby chokes to death at controversial unsupervised nursery. Child suffers horrific injury on nursery outing. 2 arrested over children's injuries as nursery closes. 2-year-old child drinks bleach.
To avoid these headlines happening to you, look carefully at the following sequences. Can you spot the hazards before they are highlighted? How many times a day do you open and shut a door? The children are having a great time splashing the water in the tray. A child has finished their snack and is heading off to play. You can't find the packet of wipes which you require to change a nappy. The children are outside playing in the garden. Mealtimes are a social part of the day. All of the children are getting ready for their lunch. It's important to clean up after meals, ensuring the nursery is ready for the afternoon activities to start. Following a morning full of fun, the children go down for a sleep. The manager is hard at work in the office. A child has been sent to ask for some paper. The maintenance team are working at making important improvements. The children have been looking forward to their trip to the park all morning. Don't ever ignore an unsafe act. Stop it. Report it. Make sure it gets sorted out. You are employed to be the responsible adult for every child in the nursery, not just those in your room. This is a legal obligation for which this film and these other resources are your ultimate training. Ignorance is no excuse. If you aren't sure, ask your manager how to get further information on health and safety or risk management in the nursery. If you don't ask, we will reasonably assume you are fully trained and aware of your legal duties to make our nurseries safe. Preventing accidents is better than dealing with them, but sometimes they happen anyway. When that's the case, you should know the process for recording and reporting. Fill out an accident form. Obtain statements from other witnesses where appropriate. Note all relevant details: age suitability, condition of equipment, environment, activity of child involved, etc. Report the details up to a senior employee. Better still, the nursery manager, who will then make sure it is formally reported for compliance purposes and make contact with parents as necessary. Recognising risks to health and safety is an ongoing part of all staff's development. Never assume you know everything about it. The online learning system and resources will help you refresh your skills and awareness. Be sure to use them. If you don't know how or don't have access, speak with your manager. If you're only with us as temporary staff or on a short-term contract, you are still required to comply with our policies, procedures, health and safety rules, all of which are held locally within the nursery you work in. Ignorance is no defence. Remember, don't ever ignore an unsafe act. Stop it. Report it. Make sure it gets sorted out. You are employed to be the responsible adult for every child in the nursery, not just those in your room.
So, thoughts on the video? Did anything shock you or stand out to you?
I noticed so I think that sometimes some of these safety concerns are evolving, whereas like you didn't have an issue one year, that maybe another year you have an issue. So our playground is kind of adjacent to our parking lot. We just have cones set up. And we had our gate where it could open on both ends. And we just obviously taught the kids not to touch the gate. Only a teacher opens the gate or a parent. But last year we had a student that opened it and she went to go run to her mom. So we had to actually take that side off. And now it only opens from the outside. So I just think that the rules kind of evolve based on your group of kids. You know, something you might not have noticed was unsafe, it becomes unsafe.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And it's so true. Getting back to knowing your group of kids too, you might go for years without having a child that runs, and then all of a sudden you have a runner. So again, like you said, those rules or those procedures evolve based on the group of kids you have. And Rebecca put poor habits that can easily be avoided. That's so true. Like for example, in the video, when the teacher left the cleaning product on the table, it can happen. I'm sure it's happened to all of us where you're cleaning and you're busy, and then a child needs something from you and you turn your back for 2 seconds and you think everything's okay, and another child grabs that cleaning product. It can happen so quickly. And Donna mentions the maintenance person. That always stood out to me too, because oftentimes we do have, you know, other people in the school. They might work for the school, but they're not necessarily the classroom teacher. And those people, like a maintenance person, doesn't always know the state regulations or the safety protocols. Um, like if you have someone coming in from the outside too to work on the air conditioning or the heating system, they might put a tool down or use something that's not appropriate in the classroom. And don't ever be afraid to use your voice and say, hey, you can't have those in the classroom right now. Or, you know, call up to your director and say, you know, we need to do something. Either we need to leave the classroom or the person working on the air conditioner needs to leave the classroom, because you want to make sure that the children are safe. And then Amaya shared, yep, the gate wasn't latched fully, so they had a child run into the parking lot. And that's true too. Also, the parents making sure that they close the doors behind them and latch the gates behind them. There's a lot of transition that happens throughout the day, especially at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And you might be caught up in a conversation with a family member, talking to them or comforting a child who's crying, and you didn't see the parents not close the gate all the way, or they left the classroom door open and a child scooted out. So again, going back to that supervision and always having your eyes on the classroom and your ears open and always listening to what's going on. Also, too, is having that open communication with your co-teachers. So if you're on one side of the playground monitoring what's going on in your area, you know, shout out to your coworker, hey, it looks like the gate is unlatched, and have them go over and check and see if they close the gate all the way. And Robin shared she has one that likes to go under tables. I was in an infant room last week and they had one of those tables where the infants sit in the chairs that are attached to the table. And 6 of them were eating with the teacher and they were completely supervised. And one went under the table and sure enough was eating food off the floor. And it happens, things happen. Did anybody else want to share anything they saw in the video? Or did the video spark anything for anybody?
It did spark. So I haven't had any children with allergies in quite a few years. Like, thankfully, no peanut allergies. But this year coming up, I have somebody who has a peanut allergy. So now I feel like I have to relearn all of those policies and procedures because I honestly forget them because I haven't done it in so long.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a really good point because I do believe that licensing has changed a little bit on that as well. So if you're available tomorrow, we'll see if it can be recorded. I'm not sure if they want to do that, but that one would be a really great one to go to or have somebody from your program attend because I know like in the past we weren't allowed to like write on a placemat or something that, you know, or have something listed. You had to kind of just know. So I'd be really interested to see what those changes are now.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into allergies a little bit later in this presentation tonight, but it is something to be aware of. And for those of you that are floating teachers and work in all of the classrooms, it's really important to not only know the allergies just in your room, but the allergies of the whole center. Because oftentimes we're moving kids around to meet ratios or teachers are covering other classrooms. So that's really important.
I
And
don't know
that's
if anyone else uses Brightwheel, but on Brightwheel you can list an allergy and it shows up with a little mark next to their name on the app to say that they have a allergy. And then you can go into their profile. I have noticed that with Brightwheel.
Oh, that's really good to know, and that's really helpful. And can that be shared like center-wide, or is it just specific to the classroom?
It's any teacher that has access to that classroom. So like if a float is in multiple classrooms, they can see all the kids in the classroom, and it like just checking them in, adding any activity, it on their profile, it has like a little symbol that shows that there's an allergy.
Oh, good. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Bright Wheel. Yep, Cassandra, that is a big one. Children walking around with food in their mouth. Um, and that happens a lot too, because sometimes parents at home are okay with kids not sitting at the dinner table or sitting on the couch while they're eating. And when they come to the classroom, they need to sit in their chairs for safety reasons. Yeah, and Bethany, thank you for sharing. That's another good idea too. So having, they have their director type out all the allergies and give a copy to each room to keep in their binders. So like in the video, the procedures for preventing injuries is first is the stop it and then the report it. So how we can stop it is making sure that the children are supervised by adults at all time. Teaching children simple safety rules and enforce consistently. So this gets into your communication with your co-teacher, making sure that every adult in the room is on the same page. We have the licensing rules and regs that we have to follow, and then you have your specific classroom rules, and then sometimes on top of all of that, you have your center policies. So just making sure that everybody's on the same page, because if the adults are consistent with the rules, then the children are going to internalize those better and they're going to become consistent with the rules. We want to make sure the indoor and outdoor play areas are in good repair and free from any hazards. So sometimes too, you might designate a staff member who goes out to the playground early in the morning before the children use it, or late in the afternoon, just to make sure that there's no hazards out there. And that could be anything from, you know, some of us who work in inner city centers, there might be needles out on the playground, to bees' nests hiding under the slide, right? So anything could be a hazard that we need to take care of before the children get out there to play. We want to make sure that cleaning materials are labeled and kept out of the reach of children. And you want to make sure that all of your emergency procedures are posted, or at least in some kind of binder where you know what to do. So you want to make sure that your emergency exits are labeled, that you have those maps for fire drills and evacuations, you know, where to exit the classroom, where to go once you get into the hallway of the school. And then if you don't know your center's safety rules, don't ever be afraid to ask. So if you're new to the center that you're working at and you're unsure of what do you do, maybe this is your first week at the center and you haven't had a fire drill yet and you don't know what to do. Don't be afraid to ask, because like I keep saying, you're the responsible adult in the classroom. You need to make sure that you know what to do in an emergency so that you can take care of the children properly. And then if something happens, so of course there are going to be accidents. Children are going to fall, they're going to scrape their knees, they're going to bump their head. So you need to make sure that you follow the proper protocol. And this is not only just for the child, but it's also for you. The injury report also protects you as a teacher, because you're documenting what happened and what the injury was and who else was in the classroom and how many children were there. This way, if there is a major incident that does need to be reported out to licensing, then you're protected as a teacher because the injury report documents how you handled the situation, what first aid you gave to the child, and what happened. Make sure that you always tell your center director what happened. Center directors sometimes have to leave the center to go to a meeting off-site, or they're not there that day. They take vacation days and time out. So not all of the incidents are always going to fall on them, and they're not always going to be aware of what happens. But if your center director doesn't know what happens, then sometimes they're going to get an email or a phone call from a parent, and the parent's going to say, hey, you know, my child got bit 3 times this month. I want to know what's happening. And if the center director doesn't know, they're going to be caught off guard, like, I didn't know. So don't be afraid to tell the center director what happens. Make sure that they're always in the loop, because oftentimes they're going to be ones that are handling some of the bigger situations or handling that parent communication piece to the incident. Another suggestion that I have is notify parents before they pick up. So this just kind of softens the blow a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to discuss accidents. You might feel nervous. You might feel, upset that something happened in the classroom. If you tell the parents before pickup, then it's not just thrust upon them. Because if you put yourself in the parents' shoes, sometimes they're rushing in at the end of their workday. Sometimes they just need to grab the kids and go because they're off to dance class and soccer practice, or they have to get to their other child's school to pick them up. This way, you're not kind of bombarding them with, oh, something happened today. So if you just send them an email, give them a quick phone call, and just say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that your child scraped their knee today on the playground. We handled everything, but there is an accident report for you to sign. That might make that relationship a little bit better, and it might make the injury or accident not feel so overwhelming to the parents. And then again, if you have that program like Bright Wheel or something similar to that online program, it's really easy in those online parent communication to just jot them a note that just says, hey, there's an accident report for you to sign today. Everything's okay, no emergency, but just wanted to let you know that so-and-so bumped their head or your child got bit today. And then serious injuries beyond those, like a scratch, a bump, a bruise, those have to be reported to New Hampshire Child Care Licensing Unit. And those are the injuries that result in either a trip to the hospital or a doctor's visit. So if a child bumped their head really hard and you're thinking that there might be a concussion, then you're going to call mom and dad. You're going to say, hey, I think you need to take your child to the hospital. They bumped their head on the shelf really hard. We put ice on it, but there might be a concussion. So mom and dad or the caregiver family is going to come, pick up the child, take the child to the doctor or the emergency room. Then you're going to fill out the accident report. You're going to give a copy to the family so they can take it with them to the hospital or the doctor's office. And then your director is going to get in touch with the child care licensing unit. And again, this is all kind of that bigger picture, like legal stuff when major accidents or incidents happen. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with the state's injury reports, but we're just going to take a look at it in case anybody on the call here tonight hasn't seen one of these before. So you're going to go and you're going to fill out the program information. And then you see here, if required. So if you needed to report that bigger accident or injury, you would put that in here. And then you're going to go ahead and put in the child's information. You're going to put in when the accident injury happens, the time. Did you have to call 911? And then you're going to give a description of the incident. And this needs to be factual. So it's going to be, what part of the body got injured? Is there a bump? Is there a red mark? Is there a bruise? And then what kind of first aid did you give? Did you just need to wash the child's knee and put a Band-Aid? Or did you need to apply ice? So you're going to write that right in here. But it needs to be very factual. So the part of the body, the type of injury, and the first aid that was applied. When you have an accident or an injury that happens because of another child, so let's say two kids are playing and one pushes another on the playground and the child falls and scrapes their knee. You are not going to write the other child's name in the injury report. You can say, child fell as a result of being pushed, but we're not going to label the other child in here. That needs to be kept confidential so that we're not using other children's names. And there's a question, if I'm a teacher assistant, am I allowed to fill out incident reports? I say yes if you are the person that witnessed the injury and did the first aid, but I would also check with your center director because some directors do have policies that they follow. Sometimes it has to be the lead teacher that fills this out. So I would ask your center director, Amaya.
Sometimes it has to be a person who's taken first aid.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you've taken first aid and CPR, I would say you're allowed to do first aid, but again, Heather, check with your center director and just make sure that there isn't a policy put in place. Because sometimes they like to have the lead teacher handle these type of situations. If it is a situation where the lead teacher needs to fill this out and needs to do the first aid, you might be put on this as the witness. So if you witnessed what happened, or if the child came running up to you on the playground and you were the first adults that saw that their knee was bleeding, then you might be given as the witness to what happens. So is that clear to everybody how we fill out an accident report? On the bottom part here, we're going to put in how the parent was notified, who notified the parents. Was it an email? Was it in person? Was it a phone call? And then we just make sure we get those signatures. And then again, if it was a serious injury, we're going to make sure that the child care licensing unit was notified. So are there any other questions about the injury report? I would say if you notified on your Brightwheel app, I would put that as an email on the injury report. So we just talked about the accident injury report, but there's also an incident. So I just want to go over accident and incident. So an accident is an unintentional, unforeseen event. So that's, water spilled on the classroom floor, the child slipped and fell, or they tripped over that chair that didn't get pushed in all the way. An incident is that intentional or inappropriate behavior. So when a child bites another child, or they get into an argument over toys and one hits another. So you're going to fill out the injury report and clearly document the injury or the incident without naming the other child, like we talked about. And then again, best practices is just to communicate incidents with families. Ensure that all your reports avoid identifying the other children. You want to discuss incidents in private settings to respect the privacy of all families. And again, I would always best practice seek your director, seek out their support to have these conversations, because sometimes these can be difficult to navigate, especially when you have those situations where the same child keeps getting hurt or the same child keeps causing the incident. This might be clues into some bigger behavior problems that are going on with the child, and you might need to have a bigger discussion. And then lastly, let families know what strategies you're putting into place to stop these behaviors. So if it was an accident that happens because chairs were not being pushed in, you can tell the parents, hey, we're gonna, tomorrow we're gonna talk to all the kids about classroom safety and taking care of our materials, and we're gonna start practice pushing in our chairs every time we get up from the table. Or you're going to say, maybe if it's a child that's constantly getting bit, you're going to talk to the family about supervision. And you're going to say, I'm going to position myself better and I'm going to supervise their play better and make sure that when this child is frustrated, that they're not lashing out and biting. I'm going to be right there to try to stop that behavior. Because oftentimes a lot of feelings come up with parents when there is an incident. So parents sometimes can feel, is my child being targeted? Why is my child always getting hit? So just make sure that you're having those conversations with them that are open and honest, so they really understand what's going on and what you're doing as a teacher to kind of minimize the incidents and injuries. Does anybody have any questions? And then one more thing before we move on from accidents and incidents. Another reason why we need to document accidents and incidents, and this is again for the center as a whole. So you're writing these down and your center director is logging them and looking at them. They can then see patterns of what's going on in the center. So if they're seeing that every afternoon at 4 o'clock, there are all these accidents out on the playgrounds, that might be a clue to the center director to say, oh, you know what? We need to start practicing better supervision, because in the afternoon, it looks like that group of staff is really chatty and they're not supervising the children correctly. And we have a lot of scraped knees that are happening, or a lot of bumps and bruises that are happening. So that's another reason how we can use incident and accident reports to kind of look at the center as a whole. So moving away from incidents and accidents, now we're going to talk about emergency preparedness and kind of those big emergencies that could happen, or hopefully we hope that they don't happen. So the reasons why we have fire drills and missing children drills is because we want to ensure safety in the center and in the classroom. We want to protect children and staff in emergencies such as fires, severe weather, or medical incidents. The reason why we practice them is we want to build confidence in you as teachers, but also in the children so that they start to learn what do we do in an emergency. We also need to comply with regulations. So practicing your emergencies 4 times a year is a licensing requirement. And then it also, because we're practicing them and we're getting the children familiar with them, it promotes calm and organization. So if you as a teacher know exactly what to do in an emergency situation and you're familiar with the procedures, it reduces your level of panic when something does happen. Also, everybody knows their role and knows what to do in a crisis. And I see Nicole said, what is missing child drill? That's when a child goes missing. So it could either be something like an unauthorized pickup. So maybe a parent who wasn't supposed to pick up a child comes into the center, picks them up, takes them, and then all of a sudden you're like, where did so-and-so go? Or a child, those children that we were talking about who are runners, maybe a child runs out of the classroom and hides somewhere in the school, and you're doing your count and you're like, uh-oh, we had 10, now we have 9, we're missing 1. So that's a missing child drill. Typically what happens, in my experience being a director at the Y, what we used to do was lock down the YMCA. So if we did a count and a child was missing, I would then call down to the front desk and say, hey, we have a missing child, and they would lock down the whole YMCA. Nobody would be allowed to enter into the building or exit the building while we did a sweep. And we had staff who had zones that they needed to go check, and we would all go and do a sweep of our zone. And then if the child was in the building, then hopefully we find them. If the child had been taken out of the facility, by shutting down the facility, we also would shut down the parking lot, and we would do car checks. So if a parent did take a child that they weren't supposed to pick up, we would then have the parking lot secured, and you could go car by car and check and see if that child was in a car. Beyond that, let's say that parent did take that child and leave the center, you would then call the police and get the police involved.
So that's just something that you're probably talking with your center director, like you're not actually practicing it. Like it's just because like we talk about our emergency preparedness, but we don't actually perform all of the drills. We just talk about them. Because I was like, I don't think I've ever done one of those before. So that's just a conversation we can have, right? Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's something that you would probably talk about at a whole staff team meeting. Some centers do practice them. I know where I worked at the YMCA, we did do that a lot because it was a large facility, and we had members coming and going all the time. So we were kind of open to some of these other incidents that could happen. So that's why I said that you could practice them. But just having a binder or some kind of book with all of those emergency procedures in them, and then just talking about them also satisfies that. And Donna, that's a great suggestion to sometimes you can use them. Hold on 1 second. I'm just gonna.
We used to practice with stuffed animals or dolls or things like that, so that, but we would do it during staff meetings or staff development days. And this way we could actually practice what it was. I can remember it was for a fire drill, but I was the assistant director to just call in and say fire drill, and she thought I was joking and didn't know what to do. She was
Right.
our closer. So, I mean, it was kind of funny and not funny at the same time, you know, but it was like, wow, well, what if there was a real fire and she had no idea what to do? So, making sure that the people who are going to be in charge know what their role is and are also willing to do that and take on that responsibility.
Right. Thank you for that, Donna. So these are the ones that every center should have. So you should have your fire evacuation, missing child, a reverse evacuation. And does everybody know what that means, reverse evacuation? So that's when something happens outside and everybody needs to come inside. Do you have your drop, cover, and hold? So that's for our weather-related emergencies like tornadoes and earthquakes. We have our lockdown and shelter in place. So that's sometimes when maybe there's an active shooter and you need to get to a safe place, or an emergency happened outside of your building, or if your center is located in a larger building, something might have happened on the other side of the building and you might need to shelter in place. You should also have a policy for bomb threats and secure campus. So secure campus is kind of what I talked about with the missing child, is kind of when you lock down the whole school. You lock down the parking lot, you lock down if you're attached to another building, maybe the whole building shuts down and locks down. And you should also have a policy for pickup and drop offs of the with that non-custodial parent. Yeah, Amaya, I would bring that up to your center director and just talk to them about some of the childproof locks and latches that you have in your classroom. And then just one more thing, sort of what Nicole was talking about, how they don't practice all of their emergencies. This happened to me also when I was a director at the YMCA. Typical afternoon, all of the kids were in their classrooms playing, and all of us adults started getting alerts on our cell phones that we were under tornado watch or warning. It was a warning, it had elevated to a warning. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think we have a procedure for a tornado. You know, we typically don't have tornadoes in this area. And I was like, what do we do? So, you know, we quickly put together a plan, and we decided that we were going to take all of the kids to the center of the YMCA. And we actually went in the locker rooms, which were located in the center of the building. And we had the kids sit on the floor and we read books to them until the weather pattern passed and we were able to safely go back into the classrooms. But that was like an aha moment for me, that we really needed to take a better look at our weather-related procedures and make sure that we had an evacuation plan or a plan in place for each of those weather-related emergencies, because things can change at any given moment. Last year when we did this cohort and we were talking about emergency plans, it was right after those earthquakes had hit in New Hampshire. So just making sure that you're familiar with all of these procedures and what to do. Does anybody have any questions?
With our drought, we've also had a lot of problems with fires, and we
Mhm.
haven't had that issue in a long time in New Hampshire, but now with all the droughts, we have to worry about that consistently. And specifically, if you happen to be in a program that's up north, like Cohort County, where there's a lot of woods. So, thinking about that, like, what would you do in that situation if there's fire near you?
Yeah, thank you for that. And then, oh, yes, for snowstorms, definitely, when it comes to the transportation of the children, if you, have, trying to think, like if you our Head Start programs, I know they use buses sometimes to transport the kids. So you might have a policy around that. If there's a snowstorm or icy roads, you're not going to use buses as transportation those days. Also, too, around that, knowing where to go. So let's say a snowstorm hits and the roof collapses because of the heavy snow. Well, it's not safe to be in the building anymore. So your emergency plan might be moving to an alternative location. So just knowing where that is. And then along that comes with the communication with the parents. So if something was to happen and you did have to move to an alternative location, how are you going to notify the parents? So you should have those emergency binders with the children's emergency contacts and phone numbers, and you might start calling parents. Or if you use that Bright Wheel app, you might send out an emergency alert, hey, we had to evacuate our building. We're at this location, parents can come and pick up. I'm trying to think of any other snow emergencies or policies that you might have around snowstorms. Sometimes, this is just kind of best practices, but if the weather is getting really bad, sometimes you don't want staff out on the road driving in the icy weather. So you might close the center early, or you might delay an opening. But that's really based on your center director and what they feel is appropriate.
I know for us, one year we had to close early, and one of the benefits of it was each one of the lead teachers called everyone in their classroom to let all the parents know, unless of course they had kiddos in other class, like we would combine it. But we found out that some of the people that were put down for emergency purposes, like if you can't get a hold of the parent, call this person. We found out a couple of them were not even in our state. One was a grandmother in Florida, and one was a grandmother in New York City. So like Manhattan, so not getting to New Hampshire anytime soon. So we had to institute a policy that if whoever was listed as your emergency contact had to live within an hour so that they could get there and pick up the children.
Yeah, that's good to know too. And also, going through the emergency contacts partway through the year would be a good idea too, because if parents change their phone numbers, get a new cell phone, but they forgot to update you, you might not have the right information. So thank you for that, Donna. So as we transition out of emergencies, we're going to go into classroom rules, and I have this short little video to share with you.
Dennis, what a jerk! I'm never playing golf with him again.
Who? Gendison?
Steve Gennison.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
He used to be a baseball player. Yeah.
Oh, how'd you end up playing golf with him?
Well, I met him on the course a couple of years ago. Yeah, played with him a lot. But today was it. We're on the 15th hole. Yeah, he's beating me by a couple of strokes. Then he's about to hit his second shot when he picks up the ball and cleans it.
So what?
Sorry. But the rules clearly state that you cannot clean the ball unless it's on the green. The rules are very clear about that.
Certainly are.
Yeah, so I penalized him a stroke.
Ah, so what happened?
He lost it. We almost came to blows. We're like face to face, like a manager and an umpire. You know, we're like, hey, we're not talking about. Say what you say.
You're in my face.
I still don't see what the big deal is.
Hey, a rule is a rule. And let's face it, without rules, there's chaos. Dennis.
So going off of what Kramer said, without rules, there's chaos. So thinking of your classroom, if we didn't have those classroom rules that I'm sure are nicely posted on the wall because it's the new year, what would the classroom be like, right? If we never said, use your walking feet or be kind to each other, respect the materials, what would it be like? It would be chaos every day. So with the children, when we're talking about rules, you want to make sure that you involve the children in making the rules, going over the rules, setting basic safety rules and discussing them with them. So why do we have these rules? You know, how are we keeping you safe in the classroom? When we're doing that, you want to make sure you use visuals, verbal reminders, and you know, make it fun. Talk to them about the rules. Read stories that have rules in them. You know, have a kindness jar. And when somebody does something good, uses their walking feet or helps another child, you can put that into the kindness jar. And every once in a while, take those out and read them together so they can, those rules get reinforced with them. I'm going to play one more short video. And this is talking about rules with the children.
So you applied for a new job and you got the interview. Now you gotta nail it. Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant can act as a practice partner so you can feel confident and prepared. Just use Adobe Acrobat Pro and AI Assistant on.
It's really important in early childhood for us to understand the significance of building those healthy practices in our classrooms and for our children to be exposed to that kind of modeling and that type of lifestyle choice, because health directly impacts educational academic outcomes, and we know that the two are directly correlated. So for us to want our children to succeed at their highest and best, we have to make sure that we're thinking about health in terms of prevention. When you think about setting up a safe classroom, early childhood teachers want to ensure that the environment and the language that they use helps the children set good boundaries for themselves. How about standing on tables? Will you guys stand on a table?
No.
No, why not?
You pick something up and you bring it to the table.
You bring things to the table? Why don't you stand on the table?
Because that's not safe.
It's not safe. How about sitting on the table? Can we sit sometimes? Sometimes I see people sitting on tables.
Yeah.
Is that safe?
No.
How come?
Because you have to sit on chairs.
For instance, children like to run, but running is for outside and not inside. It's unsafe inside a classroom. So when a child is running in the classroom, the teacher wants to stop, take the time to acknowledge with the child that this is unsafe behavior, and then actually walk the process with them so that they learn what good behavior is. It shows not only the child, but all the other children in the classroom. It models good behavior.
All right, can you show me how you'd walk?
Good job, thank you.
A second area is in regards to using furniture in safe ways. And so frequently children, especially in their toddler years, they tend to want to climb all over structures and bookcases and tables. And what we want children to understand is those things tip, and it's much better for them to be sitting in the chairs with their feet on the floor. And if they're noticing other friends are using the materials in different ways, that they acknowledge that as well, to make sure that the whole classroom stays safe, that everybody in the classroom is responsible for that.
If you're too close to the end, you'll fall. Like, I'm falling.
That's true.
Like Humpty Dumpty stand on the block.
That's right. That's a good point.
They know.
And what happened to Humpty Dumpty?
He fell. Like,
In an early child classroom, one of the ways that we teach safety is to actually bring it into the classroom. And although, we don't need helmets inside, we do use them outside when the children are on bikes, but we actually put them in the dramatic play area. We also have car seats because we know that the regulation is any child under 40 pounds needs to be in car seats. So there's a lot of, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that still need to be in car seats. We have those car seats in our dramatic play area so that children feel comfortable getting in and out of them. They learn how to use the seat belts and buckle themselves in, and they make it part of their everyday life.
Awesome job. And why did we have to buckle her in? Do you know why we had to buckle her in? Why?
Because you get safe.
This is why I canceled my DoorDash subscription and switched.
So in this video, one of the things that I really liked was the way the teacher got down at the children's level when explaining the rules to them. Was there anything else that stood out to anybody about this video? In your own classrooms, how do you involve children in the rules? Does anybody want to share some of the rules that they have?
I try to make them fun. So like especially like children love play. So when it comes to like the slow feet or like walking, like I'll go pause. All right, show me your slow motion feet, and like we'll all pretend to slow motion walk, and it helps them a lot.
That's great. I really like that. I never thought of that. That's a good one.
Our biggest rule, like our main rule, is time to be kind. So on the wall, we have like the big letters from Hobby Lobby, and like it says time to be kind, and like where our clock is the so like whenever we're in the like that is, if they're being unkind to a friend, we just point to the wall and it's time to be kind. And that's like the big one that we have.
Great. Thank you for that. And I see in the chat, using morning circle and have the kids repeat the rules to you. That's a great way for them to internalize the rules. Having them posted in different spots in the classroom, that's another good way too. That way, when something happens, you can bring the children right over to the rules, or you can just point to them and say, oh, remember kind hands. What do kind hands look like? Using puppets to explain safety rules. So that's another good way to make them less intimidating and fun. So it also doesn't just come from the teachers, because you don't want to constantly be saying, use your walking feet, use your listening ears, because you say it 100 times throughout the day and it gets very repetitive to the point where the kids are like, oh yeah, she told me to stop running again. So making it fun for them. So playing those games with them, using puppets, reading stories. Yep, sharing materials too. That's a big one.
Another good reinforcer that we started doing this year. So we've had in past years had a really tough time with nap time. Kids getting up and running, kids yelling. So we posted the rules on the wall was, you know, be quiet, stay on your mat, and like your stuffy is for snuggling and not for throwing. So every day, if each kid gets one, so it's not like just for the kids that are the ones that causing the problems. But every day, if they have a good rest time, they get to color in a star. And at the end of the week, you know, if they get 10 stars, they either get to pick a sticker or a temporary tattoo. And so far, they've been loving it. And like they get really excited about coloring in their star. They get excited about bringing their paper home to show their parents. So this year has been the best nap time yet. So I'm hoping that continues.
Oh, good. That's a great strategy to use the stars. I really like that. And you touched upon something when you were talking too about having the kids bring it home to the parents. That's another great way to involve parents is making sure that the language that you're using in school matches what the language that parents are using at home and vice versa. So that the children know, okay, you know, in order for me to be safe, I can't run in the parking lot. So if the teacher is saying that, we also want the families to be saying that as well. So a great thing to do is also share your classroom rules with the families and share the language that you use because each of you use different things. You know, you might say like catch a bubble when you want the children to settle down and stay quiet or like Cassandra said, using slow motion feet. So if you share that language with the families, and then they can start to say it at home as well. And Amaya shared that when someone hits someone, they have them talk to the other kid and give hugs if that's okay with the other child. And that's really good. We'll get into that more when we talk about behaviors and how to handle behaviors. But problem solving is also a huge way to incorporate the rules in the classroom, especially when it comes to hitting, sharing, those times when children, you know, act out for certain reasons. When you start problem solving, you can pull the rules in. So you can say, hitting is not okay. Hitting hurts our friends. We're going to use our kind hands, but then maybe they hit because the other child took a toy away from them. So then you'll get into those problem solving steps with the child. Right, and it looks like some of you use reward systems, and that's wonderful. Yeah, and that's great. So being role models too. So using kind words with your co-teacher as well. The children will pick up on that and they'll internalize, you know, where the rules are here because in our classroom there's a culture and there's a positive environment. So if the adults are being kind to each other and respecting each other, the children are going to pick up on that.
It's really important.
As you can see, my dog has entered the room. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so we're going to move from rules into allergies and meal times because this is another time of the day where, hold on 1 second. I'm sorry about that.
We also have the book, I don't know if you saw in the chat, Officer Buckle and Gloria. If anybody ever read that book by Peggy Rathman. I think she also writes Hug. but an incredible book. It might be a little wordy for some toddlers. I read it in that class, but I mean, I didn't read it word for word. We just looked at pictures. But it's really great for when you are establishing rules, like the beginning of it. Like, what is a rule? What does it look like? Are there some rules that are just silly? You know, we don't have to write a rule for everything. So it's a great one to pick up and read if you haven't read it before.
All right, I got some treats, so hopefully that satisfies him for a little bit. Puppies are like having toddlers, I've decided. Okay, so moving into allergies and mealtime safety, this is another time of the day where we might have a different set of rules. So we kind of talked about the using gentle hands, no hitting, walking feet. But when it comes to food safety, we want to make sure that the children are sitting, that they're calm, right? Because we don't want any choking to happen while they're eating. We also want to make sure that they're engaged in conversations, but they're also being safe. And the statistics I have up on the screen for you, these are taken from the Food and Allergy Research and Education. And what they say is that 8% of children in the US have food allergies. So that's 1 in 13 children and roughly 2 in every classroom. 40% of children with food allergies often have multiple food allergies. So they could have, an egg allergy, but also a milk allergy, or a peanut allergy and a shellfish allergy. Food allergy reactions can happen in multiple locations throughout the center and are not just limited to the mealtime table. So that's really important to think about. So let's say child's allergic to milk, they accidentally drink milk. You might not see it right then and there at the lunch table. You might notice it an hour later, 2 hours later, when the child is out running around on the playground. You might see that broken out into a rash, or you might see some swelling on their face. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Who has allergies, and even though you're not drinking milk right now, you're out on the playground, you might have that connection back to, oh my gosh, this rash, they might have eaten a dairy product. Thinking back to that first video that we watched too, a way to prevent allergies from happening, again, is having those allergy lists in the classroom or throughout the center, knowing who in the room has an allergy. But also, I don't know if you noticed in that video, but the children had placemats that they put their food down on. And the children that did have allergies, it was written right on their placemat. So it said like no dairy or allergic to dairy. So that might be another way that you could handle allergies in your classroom. And that's also a good way for when you have floating teachers, because oftentimes when the children are eating a meal, you might be, if you're the lead teacher, out of the classroom taking your lunch break, and an assistant might be in the classroom, or the person that covers your lunch break is in the classroom. And if they're only in there for that half hour or that hour, they might not totally be aware of who's allergic to what, or, you have a new group of kids and they don't remember that, so-and-so can't have milk, and they accidentally give that child milk. Or they might sit that child next to somebody who brought peanuts to school and they have a peanut allergy. And then just the last statistic was, reports suggest that majority of fatal food allergies and reactions are triggered by foods consumed outside of the home. So this kind of goes into why a lot of centers have moved away from letting parents share food or bring food items in for birthday parties or for special occasions. You might have a rule in your center that only prepackaged food is allowed. So this way you can minimize some of those accidents from happening. If mom wants to celebrate a child's birthday and they're allowed to bring cupcakes in, but mom baked cupcakes and you have somebody who's allergic to eggs, maybe that egg in the cupcake triggers an allergy. So just thinking about those things. And then with our little babies, like I shared earlier, being in that infant classroom and the baby being under the table and eating the food off of the floor, that child could have had an allergy. And if that teacher wasn't aware of that and wasn't closely supervising what the child was doing, that could have been an accident. So thinking about food allergies and knowing some of the symptoms. So like I said, it doesn't always happen right when the child ingests the food. It could happen hours later. So signs that we need to look for. Looking at their skin. Is there any redness or itching, hives or bumps? Sometimes there can be swelling beneath the skin. Do their eyes tear up? Are they getting red and itchy? Are they watering? Sometimes it can affect their respiratory. So you might notice all of a sudden they get this runny nose and they're sneezing, or their chest tightens up and they're having short of breath, or they're wheezing. Again, look at their mouths. Oftentimes with food allergies, one of the first thing that happens is a child's lips swell or their tongue swells. This is also a sign of I'm going to mess up that word, anaphylactic shock. So when their tongue swells, it's closing their airway. They could also become pale. They could change color. There could also something be going on with their intestines, and there could be vomiting or diarrhea. They could have abdominal pain. And then it could also affect their heart. So they might tell you that they feel a racing heartbeat. Their blood pressure can drop. They might feel dizzy or faint. And then in severe cases, they can lose consciousness. So just know to look for these signs and just be aware of all the allergies in your classroom. And then all of these symptoms that we talked about can also show up in non-food related allergies. So some other common allergies is bee stings. A child could be allergic to a certain medication. Some other common situations that happen in the classroom. So Amaya says, if the child can't talk, how can they tell you that some of this stuff is happening, like abdominal pain? So that's a really good question, Amaya. So when you're working with the infants and toddlers, that's when we want to really know their cries, right? So child might be playing, they seem happy, but then they start crying. And maybe that crying goes on for a while. So you want to really check in with that child and, why are they crying? You changed their diaper, they ate, you gave them a nap, something else must be going on. Also with the toddlers too, they might not be able to verbalize, it's my stomach hurts. They're not going to run up to you and say, my tummy hurts. But if you're checking in with them, going through their body, if they're crying, they don't seem right, ask them, say, is it your ears that hurt? And they might say yes or no. Is it your tummy that hurts? They might say yes or no. So kind of checking in with that body and doing that body scan with them, they might give you a clue as to what's going on, or they might not. And in these situations, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you've noticed their behavior change, their mood change, they're just not acting themselves, don't ever be afraid to call their parents. So you can call the families and say, hey, so and so came into school fine. He was playing, but then we had lunch. And after lunch, something seems to be off. Do you want to come in and pick them up and have them checked out by a doctor? Because another thing is this could be the first time that this situation happens, right? So you have these young infants and toddlers, and they're being introduced to new foods all the time, right? So maybe the first time they ate strawberries, nothing happens. But the second time they eat strawberries is with you. And that second time they eat the strawberry, they break out into a rash or it upsets their stomach. So it's really important to know to look for these signs, but also to communicate with families because the family might not know that they're allergic to something yet because they're just being introduced to these new foods. Some other situations that you might come into is like a chronic ear infection. So children could be crying because their ears hurt, or they might have asthma. So you might see that wheezing or that tightness of breath. And with the chronic and allergies and chronic medical conditions, how are these communicated with you in your centers? Do you read the children's emergency cards or is it coming from your center director? Just another tip with this is if, on the emergency card, it says that, so and so has this medical condition, and maybe it's a medical condition that you've never dealt with before. Don't be afraid to ask the parents, hey, could you set aside some time with me and talk to me about how we should handle this? What are the symptoms? What are the signs? So another story that I'll share with you is I had a little girl in my program who had never had seizures before. And one day at nap time, the teacher yelled out to me and she said, something's wrong. This child is shaking. Something's not right. So I ran down to the classroom and I just from looking at her knew she was having a seizure. So there was nothing on her medical records. There was nothing in her emergency card that noted that she had seizures because this was the very first time that she had a seizure. So we ended up calling 911 and they came, called the family, and I actually rode in the ambulance with the child to the hospital where the child was checked out. And it turns out that she ended up having a medical condition where she had seizures around sleeping, and it had something to do with her breathing. But the family didn't know of this and the school didn't know of this because this was the very first time that this had happened with that child. Yep, so Heather said we talk with the parents and we have a backpack and you take it with us everywhere you go. Yep, so that's very important for those children that need EpiPens, right? So if they are allergic to bee stings or peanuts and they need that EpiPen, you're always going to have it with you. Knock on wood, chances are you're never going to have to use it, but make sure that you do know how to use them. So sometimes you can get the ones that don't have the medication in them and you can practice with them. It doesn't have the needle attached to it, but you can practice opening them and, seeing how forceful you have to push them to inject them. So that's something that you might want to bring up to your center director. If you do have EpiPens and you're not quite sure how to use them, bring it up at a staff meeting and maybe you all can take turns practicing how to use that EpiPen. Yep, so that's great. So in that Bright Wheel app or that app, they have a symbol next to the child's name when there is a medical condition. I believe assistant teachers are allowed to look at medical and emergency information. Again, check with your center director, but that should be information that's public to all the teachers because you want to keep all the kids safe. So you want to know what signs to look for, what the conditions are that the child may have, if there's any special equipment or anything that you need to carry with you in your emergency bags or your first aid kits. Oh, that's really good that it does walk you through how to use it. Because it can be scary if you do have to use one. Not everybody's comfortable doing that, but that's good that they are able to walk you through it. So now we're going to touch upon kind of moving away from the allergies and the emergencies a little bit and going into the rules around meals, and what meals look like in your center. So we have family style versus meals from home. And family style is when the food is, you have a cook at your school and the food is prepped by the cook and you bring it to the table and everybody passes the bowls around and takes turns, sharing and putting food into their plates. This type of eating promotes that kind of shared, independent kind of serving themselves, pouring their own milk, sharing, passing things. The children often set the table. So you might have a classroom job. It might be someone's job to put the plates on the table, someone's job to put the silverware on the table. And then at the end of the family style eating, the children are responsible for putting their dishes into the bin. And usually the cook comes back in and takes them to the kitchen to be washed. Meals from home is what it says. The parents provide the meals, they prepare them at home and they bring them into the classroom. And the reason why we bring this up during the safety training is because you need to know choking hazards, right? So if parent brings grapes but doesn't cut them in half for those young toddlers, that could be a choking hazard. Also, just making the parents aware of what are healthy choices for the child. If they're bringing candy to school or sugary drinks and your center doesn't allow those, you want to have that open communication with the parents and really help them to know what are healthy meals. With both meals, the teacher is going to be sitting with the children. You always want to have at least one staff sitting at the table monitoring the children. So making sure that they're taking bites, they're chewing and swallowing properly, that they're not bouncing around in their chair while they're putting grapes into their mouth or their cucumbers, because you want to prevent those choking hazards. They're staying in their chairs. They're not getting up and running to the other side of the classroom with food in their mouth. And then I'm just going to show you real quickly. So some of the rules or procedures around family style eating. So of course, and with both, you are going to wash your hands. So that's another classroom rule, is that we wash our hands before we eat. Again, the setting the table, the passing to one another. You have those self-help skills where they're learning to pour and serve themselves. The teacher is right there with them. And then the children are cleaning up after. So it kind of teaches that responsibility. And then with the meals from home, this is just a little resource that I have for you that you can share with families. I'll send these out tomorrow when we send out our follow-up email, but this is a good way to share with parents about what should be provided in the children's meals. You know, what's considered healthy? What do the serving sizes look like?
I'm noticing on your handout, like it said parents are required, like, so when it said like parents are required to provide milk. So like we just have the kids have water. Like obviously if the parent sends milk, we'll serve it to their child because parents do provide lunches, but we shouldn't be asking parents to bring milk necessarily, or are there certain requirements that I'm missing?
No, I don't think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, but milk is a requirement for the toddlers, right? Infants and toddlers.
Yeah, gone preschool, so.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
it also, you might want to check your licensing regulations because USDA, we're supposed to, for the minimum, we're supposed to follow USDA guidelines. So even if the parents are not providing all of the materials that are supposed to, the components, we should be supporting that. So, but this was all we're having all new licensing. I shouldn't say all new. It's been re-looked at. So as of the September 22nd, those new rules will go into effect. So that could be different. I haven't read them thoroughly. So
Right.
the changes.
I was just curious because I mean, we provide snack, but parents provide lunches. And there are definitely a few parents that I'm working really hard with because they definitely they provide a lot of food for their child, but a lot of unhealthy foods. But I wasn't sure that we're supposed to, like when it said parents are responsible for providing all, I just wanted to make sure like they don't have to provide certain things, or if that is something I need to look into.
And thank you, Tara, that if you're using CSFP, obviously there's strict guidelines around what needs to be provided. But yes, Nicole, I would definitely, that's a really good question, and I really feel like definitely checking the licensing regs tomorrow. I feel really bad because poor Melissa, I'm gonna be like, hey, guess what? We just did a thing on allergies. Hey, guess what? What about food? So she'll get a lot of questions. Like, where should I be looking? I know we used to do a lot of trivia games around the licensing regs. So we would, you know, once a week we would have a trivia question that was posted, and then then people would, you know, our staff would then put in the answer as well as where they found it in the regulations. Every classroom had a copy of the regulations. And of course, I mean, like in my room, I had taught, I had a mixed age group. We were infants and toddlers, but we were 1 to 3.5. So some kids were in cribs and some were on the floor, and like the big one was always how many feet apart were children supposed to be, you know, and head to toe, blah, blah, blah. So making sure those things were put into place, but also we did CACFP. So I don't really remember like what it was before then. Because we did CACFP for so many, many years.
Yeah, and for those of you that are not familiar with CACFP, that's when your center receives money from the USDA, right, Donna? Yes, they receive money from the USDA to serve food at school. So when that happens, you have to follow the guidelines of how many grain components you can have, how much milk the children need to have, and you have to follow portion sizes. Same with fruits and vegetables. So that's why this resource from Child Care Aware has the must have all 4 components. But that, I think when it comes to Nicole's question, if you're not receiving money, you don't have to follow as strict guidelines, but you might have suggested for the parents. So like a suggested healthy list, or you can also have rules. No candy is allowed at schools. Sugary drinks and soda is not allowed at school.
Yeah, I actually just had today one of the children that doesn't have the healthiest things. I actually had to ask them not to bring. I don't remember what they're called, but they're those fruit roll-ups that had like tattoos on them. So we were breaking it into smaller pieces for her, but she was still like choking on it because it's so sticky that it would get caught in her throat. And I mean, she wasn't choking, but like it was stuck in her throat and she would cough. So I was like, please do not send these anymore. I mean, they're really sugary, number one, but it's like, no, these can't be here.
Yeah, but that's a good way to approach it too, and just say, this is a choking hazard and we cannot have them in the classroom. I mean, it's okay to say that because it's a safety hazard. I think the parents would feel better knowing that you're keeping their child safe, and you can provide them with alternatives, with different snacks that they are allowed to bring.
Yeah, we actually, I don't even know what those ones are, but they're kind of like a fruit roll up, but they're like a healthier version and they're little skinny ones. And we showed him that one and I was like, this is a much better alternative that like the kids enjoy.
Good. And then for my infant and toddler teachers, when it comes to bottle feeding, so real quickly, we're just going to go through this because I know we're running out of time, but just make sure that when you're feeding the babies that you're holding them in the proper position, positioning the bottle at an angle instead of straight up and down to make sure that they're not choking on the milk. Sometimes their stomachs can get upset. Allow the babies to take breaks from drinking as needed and never force them to finish their bottle. If they seem like they're done and they don't want any more, don't force them to keep eating. And never, ever, ever put cereal or other food in the bottle because that is a big choking risk. And then along with that, if you are an infant teacher and there are rules around breast milk storage. So how long it can be refrigerated, how long you can use it for. And this was also taken from the CACFP. And this is also in the New Hampshire licensing regs. They follow the CACFP when it comes to breast milk. And then this was another activity we had, but we have run out of time and I don't want to keep you guys. I know it was a long day, so we can revisit this at another time. But what I'd like you to do is just think about, as you're in your classrooms this week and you're looking through your room, I want you to think about all the things we talked about tonight and look at your classroom. Are there things in your classroom that you need to change to make the environment safe? Do you know your center's emergency procedures, or are there some that you're going to ask your center director about? And are the meal times in your classroom, are they enjoyable? And are the children being safe and they're learning healthy eating habits? And our next session is going to be on September 16th at 6 p.m. And that's going to be with Lindsay Parisi. And she is going to go over effective supervision and positioning in the classroom. And just remember, if you want that additional TA in between these two sessions, reach out to me or Donna to set that up. And we can do a Zoom call with you, or we can come out to the center. Does anybody have anything else before we say goodbye for the evening?